There is an authority in quiet that the loud will never comprehend. It doesn't broadcast its plans. It doesn't compete for the spotlight. It doesn't need validation. Yet its presence reshapes every room it enters. We're conditioned to admire the loudest voice, the quickest comeback, the most visible hustle. But genuine power, especially in a woman, is often found in her restraint. Not from a place of fear, but from a place of profound self-possession. The most intelligent woman isn't the one who wins every argument or has an opinion on everything. She's the one who can observe chaos and choose not to participate. She's the one who knows the difference between being wanted and being valued. She's the one who understands this core truth. The way I care for myself dictates the terms of every interaction I have. This isn't a guide on how to perform or be perfect. It is an invitation into awareness. Because when a woman becomes truly aware of her own patterns, how she moves, how she thinks, how she responds, she activates a silent strength that commands respect without ever asking for it. Let's explore that awareness together. If you are joining us for the first time, welcome to Self-Mastery. We exist to share wisdom that helps you protect your peace, elevate your life, and live with intention. Subscribe and activate the notification bell so you never miss a message that could recenter your spirit and redefine your journey. Let's begin. There is a vast difference between being quiet and being internally still. Many people are quiet on the outside, but inside, their mind is a storm, replaying conversations, anticipating criticism, rehearsing defenses. It's a mind at war with itself. But a deeply intelligent woman cultivates something rarer: inner sovereignty. This isn't about silencing thoughts, it's about ending the inner civil war. She doesn't need to isolate herself to find peace. She simply curates what is allowed past the gate of her attention. Her mind becomes a guarded space, not a public square open to every passerby's opinion or emotional forecast. This isn't arrogance. It is the wisdom earned from 1,000 small battles. It's the clarity that comes after repeatedly trading her inner calm for a temporary victory in some outer drama. She has learned, often painfully, that justifying her existence, defending her boundaries over and over, and absorbing the emotional state of others does not lead to connection. It leads to burnout. Neuroscience calls this cognitive overload. Think of your brain as a computer with too many tabs open. Each unresolved conflict, each negative loop, each moment of overthinking is another tab, consuming processing power and flooding your system with cortisol. This constant stress literally wears down your prefrontal cortex, the CEO of your brain, responsible for sound judgment, emotional regulation, and foresight. But when a woman guards her inner stillness, she protects this sacred executive function. She gives her mind the oxygen it needs to operate from wisdom, not from a state of emergency. This single practice is the bedrock of her emotional intelligence. It's not a theory, it's how she exists in the world. Think of a woman who lives in reaction. A colleague makes a passive-aggressive comment and her day is ruined. A date doesn't text back immediately and she spirals into self-doubt. Her life is a boat tossed on the waves of others' moods. Her nervous system is always in high alert. Now, picture a different woman. A colleague says the same thing. She notices the sting, but she pauses. In that space, she doesn't just hear the words. She sees the other person's insecurity. She doesn't have to absorb the poison. She can stand on her own solid ground and choose a response that serves her, not her trigger. That is the power of a quiet mind. It isn't passive. It is precise, and it fundamentally changes how the world responds to you. In Eastern philosophy, there's a concept: the master of the house hears the guest at the gate. It implies she is so present in her own inner home that she can perceive influences before they enter. She feels the energy in a room. She can tell when a person's words are a performance. She hears the question behind the question. Because her own mind isn't a constant monologue of noise, she can listen to reality. A woman like this becomes an enigma. Why? Because she is not reactive. She doesn't need to have the last word. She doesn't show up for every fight she's invited to. In a culture addicted to immediate response, her calm is disarming. People feel a different quality in her presence, a centeredness, a quiet confidence, and this stillness has a practical magic. In relationships, it's what separates a conflict that destroys from a conversation that builds. There's a tale of a seasoned therapist known for her work with high-conflict couples. They would arrive ready for battle, but she would often start the session by sitting in complete silence, simply holding the space. When asked why, she'd say, "I am waiting for the room to tell the truth. The anger speaks first, then the fear. I wait for the part of them that wants to heal." This is a woman who refuses to speak from her wound. She waits for her wisdom to catch up to her emotions. Science backs this up. Research shows that a 90-second pause after an emotional trigger allows the amygdala, the brain's alarm system, to cool down, letting the more logical prefrontal cortex come back online. In short, if you just wait a moment, you dramatically increase your odds of acting with wisdom instead of regret. A highly intelligent woman knows this, so she practices the sacred pause not just in yoga, but in the middle of a heated argument. When she's attacked, she doesn't leap to her own defense. When she's misunderstood, she doesn't scramble to clarify. When she's dismissed, she doesn't shrink, she holds her center. And from that stillness, the right next move becomes obvious. This isn't an absence of feeling, it is the mastery of it. This leads to the second habit, knowing the balance of water and rock. Water is yielding, rock is firm. Society often tells women to be one or the other. Be soft, accommodating, gentle, or be hard, assertive, unbreakable. The truly intelligent woman rejects this false choice. She has been too much like water and been swept away by others' currents. She has been too much like rock and watched love fail to find a foothold. Through deep self-awareness, she has learned to be both. The secret is emotional discipline, practiced not for an audience, but as an act of profound self-respect. She understands that a burst of anger might feel powerful for a second, but it's a costly expenditure of her life force. She also knows that consistently being the one to forgive too soon, to stay quiet, to keep the peace, to bend until she breaks, costs her something more valuable, her dignity. So she learns a different dance. When someone violates a boundary, she doesn't raise her voice. She simply revokes their access. When a supposed friend consistently uses her for emotional labor, she doesn't lecture them. She just becomes less available. When the world feels like too much, she doesn't shatter. She slows down, consults her own body, and honors its need for rest. This is her rock, quiet, steady, and immovable. Yet within that strength, she cultivates water. The softness to be vulnerable without being a victim. The fluidity to feel grief without drowning in it. The capacity to love with an open heart, without losing her own ground. Psychologists call this emotional agility, the skill of moving through your feelings without getting trapped by them. It is the presence of choice. In relationships, this creates profound trust. A man, for instance, often feels safer with a woman who can feel her emotions fully, but is not governed by them. A woman who can articulate her needs with clean clarity, not with weapons of guilt or shame. A woman who can maintain her grace even when she doesn't get her way. This isn't a performance. It's the result of deep inner work. It is what makes real intimacy possible. I recall a story of a woman whose partner had grown emotionally neglectful. For months, she tried everything: pleading, anger, strategic silence. It was a painful cycle. One night, instead of replaying the scene, she said to him, calmly and without malice, "I love the man I know you can be, but I cannot build a bridge to you all by myself. My hand is out if you choose to meet me, but I will no longer be the only one holding the weight." For the first time, he didn't hear a complaint. He heard a fact. Her words weren't a threat, they were a boundary rooted in self-worth. He could feel the rock beneath the water. This is the woman who earns respect. People may not always like her decisions, but they know she is not a game player. Her presence is grounding. Her love is not a negotiation. Her emotions are not a threat. She is a source of peace. And people will either rise to meet her there, or they will naturally fall away. From a neurological standpoint, this emotional self-regulation strengthens the pathways in the prefrontal cortex, creating an upward spiral. The better she regulates her emotions, the safer her relationships become. The safer her relationships, the more resilient and adaptive her brain. It all begins with one practice: the pause, taking one breath before she speaks, asking herself, does this response honor the woman I am committed to becoming? Choosing her tone, her timing, her truth. And on the day she fails, because she is human, she does not condemn herself. She gets curious, she learns, she recalibrates. That is emotional intelligence as a living practice. A woman who knows when to be water and when to be rock cannot be easily manipulated. She cannot be guilt, tripped into self-abandonment, or baited into a fight. She moves with an inner compass, and this gives her an invisible, undeniable power in her life. She doesn't need to dominate or submit. She exists in her own balance. And this balance of stillness and discernment, of water and rock, becomes the foundation of her influence, her love, and her legacy. There is a form of intelligence that highly discerning women possess that is almost invisible in a world that measures intelligence by how much one talks. That skill is deep observation. She has taught herself to truly see, to listen beneath the words, to stay grounded in pure awareness while everyone else is rushing to judge. This habit isn't born of shyness, it is born of discipline. It is a quiet power, the choice to understand a situation fully before trying to make herself understood. A highly intelligent woman watches more than she speaks, not because she is empty of thoughts, but because she knows most people don't listen to learn, they listen to reply, and she refuses to pour her energy into conversations that go nowhere. Think of a woman starting a new project. While others jockey for position, assert their ideas, and try to make an early impression, she spends the first few meetings in quiet observation. She watches, she listens. She notices the team's unspoken rules. She sees who gets defensive under pressure, who offers solutions, who quietly does the work, and who takes the credit. Within a short time, she hasn't just learned the project's goals, she has an emotional and political map of the entire team. This habit of patient observation allows her to navigate with wisdom instead of anxiety. When she finally does speak, her words have gravity, not because they are loud, but because they are informed. They are rooted in a clear perception of reality. And that kind of presence is rare. When a woman sees people as they are, not as she wishes they were, she commands a type of respect you can never demand. Neuroscience provides a beautiful explanation for this. The practice of deep, non-judgmental observation activates the brain's mirror neuron system. This is the neural circuitry that allows us to feel empathy and intuitively grasp what others are feeling. When a woman trains herself to observe not just what is said, but the tone, the posture, the flicker in the eyes, she is honing her intuition. This sixth sense isn't magic. It is emotional data processed by a focused mind. So many women have told me they look back and realize, I knew. They saw the red flags but dismissed them. The partner who couldn't hold their gaze while apologizing. The friend whose compliments always felt like a competition. The boss who was charming to superiors but dismissive to subordinates. The information was all there, but it was drowned out by the noise of hope, distraction, and the desire to give the benefit of the doubt. But the highly intelligent woman doesn't rush to judgment or to trust. She waits. She gathers data. She observes how people act when they are joyful, when they are stressed, when they feel powerful, and when they feel unseen. She listens with her whole being because she knows that character is revealed not in grand declarations, but in 1,000 tiny, unguarded moments. In relationships, this habit is both a shield and a bridge. A woman who observes is not easily tricked by charisma. She sees behind the mask. She notices the inconsistencies between their words and their actions. She watches how a potential partner treats service staff, speaks about their past, handles disappointment, or responds to a simple no. From these small pixels of data, a clear picture of their character emerges. But she also uses this skill to build love. She notices her partner is quiet, not because he is angry, but because he is carrying a heavy burden. She senses when a friend is struggling, not from their words, but from the lack of light in their eyes. This allows her to offer the right kind of support to create true safety, because she isn't just reacting, she's attending. As one wise woman put it, I stopped asking so many questions. I just learned to watch, because the answers are always showing themselves. This quiet awareness makes her magnetic. She listens in a way that makes people feel truly witnessed. She remembers the little things, the way someone's voice softens when they talk about a passion, the way their posture changes when they finally relax, the way their eyes sparkle when they share a dream. And because she truly sees them, people feel safe to be real with her. But her observation is also turned inward. She watches her own patterns. She notices the tone of her voice when she's exhausted. She observes the loop of her thoughts when she feels insecure. She becomes a student of her own inner landscape. And this is where observation becomes the engine of growth. When she can observe herself without the whip of self-judgment, she gains the power to change with grace. She notices when she is slipping into old patterns, the urge to people please, the compulsion to over-explain, the retreat into emotional shutdown. And because she sees them coming, she is no longer their prisoner. This self-awareness is the key to emotional freedom. It is the difference between saying, "This is just how I am," and saying, "This is a pattern I am choosing to release." From this solid ground of observation, another habit naturally flows: creation. A highly intelligent woman is not satisfied being a passive consumer of information, of trends, of others' opinions, of drama. She is a creator. She creates sanctuary in her home. She creates space in her schedule for well-being. She creates beauty in the ordinary, peace in her connections, and meaning in her days. This act of creation is often private. It might not result in a gallery showing or a published book, but it is deeply transformative. She writes in a journal to process her thoughts. She cooks a meal with intention and care. She designs her morning routine with purpose. She curates her environment to soothe her soul. In doing so, she sends a constant message to her subconscious. I am the architect of my experience, not a bystander waiting for life to happen to me. There is a distinction between motion and movement. One is reactive, the other intentional. A woman who is constantly scrolling, reacting, checking, and rushing is in motion. But a woman who pauses to create, who reads to deepen, who writes to clarify, who builds to express, that woman is in movement. It is directed, purposeful, and alive. This fundamental shift from a consumer mindset to a creator mindset changes her relationships. When a woman is always consuming advice, validation, opinions, she outsources her own inner authority. She becomes dependent on others to define her reality, to tell her how to feel and what to do. But when she creates, she reclaims that authority. Her journal becomes her wisest friend. Her routines become her refuge. Her silence becomes her guide. In romance, this habit is an antidote to codependency. She doesn't look to a partner to be her source of happiness or stability. She brings her own full, vibrant life to the relationship. She creates her own joy. She doesn't wait for it to be delivered. She initiates her own healing. She doesn't demand it from another. This makes her love a generous offering, not a desperate grasp. There's a story of a woman whose identity was shattered by a painful divorce. For months, she was in pure consumption mode: self-help podcasts, therapy, articles. It all helped, but a core piece was missing. One day, on a whim, she bought some clay. She hadn't sculpted since she was a child. As her hands began to work, something inside her shifted. The pain didn't vanish, but it found a new form. Her art became her voice, a mirror. a way to rebuild herself from the inside out. She later reflected, "It wasn't the art that saved me. It was the act of making something. It reminded me that I could still bring something new into the world, that I was more than my story of loss." This is the power of creation. It's not about the final product. It is about the practice of presence. And in that presence, a woman reclaims her own soul. Science confirms this. Engaging in creative acts lights up the brain's default mode network, which is crucial for self-reflection, memory consolidation, and envisioning the future. When a woman creates, she is not running from her problems. She is actively integrating them. This habit also transforms her relationship with time. She no longer feels like life is a series of things happening to her. She is a co-creator. She chooses how she begins and ends her day. She chooses how she rests and how she engages. She doesn't just consume food, she creates nourishment. She doesn't just consume social media, she creates intentional boundaries around it. She doesn't just consume relationships, she contributes life to them. And as she embodies this, her energy changes. It becomes deeply attractive. People can feel when a woman is living by design. Her presence has weight. She doesn't need to chase the spotlight. She doesn't need to compete. She simply is. And her being is more compelling than any performance. But this creation demands discipline. It is always easier to consume than to create, to scroll than to write, to react than to build. And so the highly intelligent woman doesn't wait for inspiration to strike. She builds a rhythm, a sacred space in her life where creation is a non-negotiable. It might be 10 minutes of writing in the morning, a silent walk after work, or one day a month completely unplugged. She commits. And in that commitment, she finds herself over and over again, not in the noise of the world, but in the quiet, powerful act of choosing what she contributes to it. Observation shows her what is real. Creation reminds her what is possible. And together, they are the twin engines of a life lived with purpose, not for performance. There is a quiet power in a woman who doesn't need to announce her boundaries. She doesn't post manifestos about them. She doesn't deliver ultimatums. She doesn't exhaust herself trying to make others comfortable with her limits. Her boundary isn't a wall she built. It is the natural edge of her own energy. And those who respect that energy can get close. Those who don't find they simply cannot. A highly intelligent woman knows that boundaries are not about punishing others. They are about preserving her own internal alignment. She has learned through bitter experience that over-giving to people who underappreciate leads to a slow death of the soul. It breeds resentment, depletion, and a dangerous disconnection from her own truth. And so, her boundaries become an unspoken standard, upheld not by arguments, but by consistency. When someone repeatedly disrespects her time, she doesn't deliver a lecture. She just becomes less available. When someone subtly undermines her or uses manipulation, she doesn't engage in a debate to prove her point. She simply withdraws her presence, with grace, with quietness, and with finality. And that withdrawal is the message more powerful than any words. I will not participate in my own disrespect. The world often labels women who do this as cold, difficult, or arrogant. But this judgment misses the entire backstory. They have already cried the tears. They have already explained themselves to people who weren't listening. They have already bent themselves into shapes that were not their own. And through that fire, they were not hardened into stone, but clarified into crystal. And clarity does not need to shout. In psychology, the term enmeshment describes a state where personal boundaries dissolve in a relationship and one person's identity gets lost in the other's. Many intelligent women have survived these dynamics. They have loved with such intensity that they disappeared. And when that love wasn't met with equal respect, they found themselves hollowed out. But instead of letting that experience make them bitter, they let it make them wise. Not more aggressive, but more discerning. And from that discernment, they began to construct a life where their boundaries were no longer a reaction to pain, but a reflection of deep self-love. Think of the woman who used to say yes to everything. Yes to the extra project. Yes to the last-minute favor. Yes to forgiving behavior that was never going to change. She believed being indispensable was the same as being loved. But inside, she was crumbling. No one knew, because her smile was her shield until the day she hit a wall. She had nothing left to give. It was in the silence of that burnout that she had a revelation. No one was going to rescue her. The life she craved had to be claimed, and claiming it started with the word no. She started small, turning off her work phone after 7 p.m. without apology, declining invitations to events that felt draining, canceling plans when her body was screaming for rest, refusing to engage with backhanded compliments. And slowly her world began to reorganize itself around her new standard. Some people faded away. Others leaned in, now treating her with the same respect she was finally showing herself. A woman who doesn't explain her boundaries isn't cruel. She is simply no longer for sale. She knows that a person who is right for her will not see her boundaries as a threat. They will see them as a sign of her strength and self-respect. They will read her silences. They will honor her rhythm. They will value her peace. In relationships, this becomes a powerful filter. People who rely on guilt, emotional pressure, or passive aggression to get their needs met will quickly find she is not a viable target. She refuses to play emotional tug of war. She will simply let go of the rope, even if it hurts, because she knows that no relationship is worth the cost of self-abandonment. There's a saying, your boundaries are not a negotiation. The highly intelligent woman lives this not as a defensive posture, but as a peaceful reality. She has nothing to defend. Her presence is a yes. Her absence is a no. Her peace is her priority. But these boundaries are also internal. She sets limits on her own mind. She refuses to let it spiral into endless loops of self-criticism or replay old wounds. She notices when her thoughts are drifting back to a story, where she was a victim, where she wasn't good enough, where she was left behind. And she gently but firmly tells that part of herself, we don't live there anymore. This internal boundary setting is an act of self-leadership. She is no longer a slave to every passing thought or emotion. She values her own energy too much to waste it on things she cannot change. Her attention is a sacred resource, and she invests it only in what is aligned with her growth and her truth. One woman shared how she used to be an expert at excusing poor behavior in others. He's just stressed. She didn't really mean it that way. They have a lot going on. But she came to realize that by constantly making excuses for others' inconsistency, she was compromising her own integrity. She wasn't just letting them treat her poorly, she was training them that it was permissible. So she changed the pattern. Now, when an apology is not followed by a change in behavior, she withdraws. When promises are made but not kept, she adjusts her investment, not with anger, but with clarity. Because she has learned that love without respect is a mirage, and attention without consistency is a waste of her time. In a romantic partnership, this type of woman is both captivating and grounding. Captivating because she cannot be owned or controlled. Grounding because her standards create a container of safety. Her partner knows that her love is deep and real, but it is not unconditional in the face of disrespect. She will not pursue. She will not beg. She will not shrink herself to keep someone's interest. This isn't a power play. It is the power that comes from being fully home in oneself. She knows her worth. She knows her values. And she knows that anyone who asks her to compromise them as a down payment on love is not offering love at all. Eastern wisdom teaches that a person in harmony with the Tao becomes like water, soft enough to yield, but powerful enough to carve stone. She doesn't fight life, she flows with its currents. And an essential part of that flow is knowing when to say no, when to retreat, when to guard the sacred space that allows her to thrive. That protection is often quiet. It might be turning off the news. It might be declining to participate in gossip. It might be refusing to offer an emotional reaction to someone who is clearly trying to provoke one. And sometimes, it's just choosing silence over arguing with someone who is determined to misunderstand you. There is a profound peace that comes from not needing to be right, from trusting that your truth will be lived, not just spoken. Boundaries are not erected overnight. They are built from the rubble of past heartbreaks, from moments of betrayal, and from the quiet, fierce decision to never, ever abandon oneself again. A woman who has walked through that fire arrives at a sacred conclusion. I know what it feels like to be disrespected. I will not be the one to do it to myself. And so her life simplifies. Not because conflict disappears, but because her choices become clear. Her yes is a full-body yes. Her no is a peaceful no. And she feels no obligation to justify either one. A woman who moves this way changes the very air around her. People become more mindful in her presence, more honest, not from intimidation, but from inspiration. They sense that this is not a woman you can string along, not someone you can gaslight, not someone you can wear down with demands. This woman has come home to herself. And in doing so, she teaches the world how to treat her, not with lectures, but with her very being. If someone asks why she won't allow something, she doesn't need to give a speech. She can just smile and walk away, because her boundary is not a debate. It is a reflection of her self-worth, and it requires no one else's permission. There is a profound dignity in a woman who treats herself well, not just in grand, public gestures, but in the quiet, unseen rituals of her daily life. Not the accomplishments that earn applause, but the small, consistent acts she performs when she is her only audience. These mundane rituals are the true architecture of her self-esteem. They are the tangible proof of her value, not as a theory she believes, but as a standard she lives. A highly intelligent woman knows that confidence isn't a personality trait, it's an outcome. It is the result of how she talks to herself, nourishes herself, rests herself, moves, dresses, listens, and comes back to her own center, day after day. These actions may seem ordinary, but they are what forge her identity. They are the soil in which her peace, her decisions, and her healthy relationships grow. It starts the moment she wakes up. A woman in alignment with herself does not instinctively grab her phone to consume the world's anxiety. She reaches for herself first, for stillness, for a breath, for intention. She knows that the first few minutes of her day set the energetic tone for everything that follows. So she creates a simple morning rhythm that reminds her of who she is before the world tells her who she should be. It could be 5 deep breaths, a glass of water enjoyed by a window, 1 page written in a journal, a gentle stretch. Not as a chore, but as an act of devotion to the woman she is. I know a woman who was drowning in exhaustion, not just from her job, but from the constant emotional pull of her family, friends, and a partner who took her energy for granted. She was losing herself. Her mood was volatile, her body a knot of tension. A mentor gave her a simple task. For 10 minutes every morning, do something that is only for you. Something that feels like coming home. She resisted at first. What can 10 minutes do? But she tried. Just 10 minutes of sitting with a cup of tea. No phone, no demands, no noise. Within a month, her entire reality had shifted. Not because her problems vanished, but because her foundation became solid. She found she was less reactive to daily stressors. She spoke with more clarity. She felt more anchored in herself. That simple, 10-minute ritual became her anchor in the storm. This reveals a core truth. Self-respect is built in layers. You don't achieve it through one heroic act. You build it through the daily, humble rituals that declare your own worth, especially when no one else is affirming it. A woman who practices this stops looking for her value in all the wrong places. She doesn't need constant external validation to feel beautiful because she has already taken the time to care for her body with kindness. She doesn't need a promotion to feel worthy because she has already kept the small promises she made to herself that morning. Even if it was just drinking her water, taking a short walk, or reading one chapter of a book. Her small acts of integrity accumulate. They compound. They become her silent strength, and this strength radiates into her relationships. A woman who respects herself is naturally selective, not from a place of ego, but from a place of energy preservation. She doesn't have time for shallow connections. She doesn't let inconsistent people occupy her mind. She will not stay in situations where she has to audition for care and respect. She isn't harsh. She simply knows that she cannot sacrifice her own well-being, her rhythm, or her peace to be loved. The love she accepts must be at the same level as the love she gives herself. Psychology confirms that rituals create a sense of safety in the human brain. Our nervous systems are calmed by predictability and consistency. When a woman creates her own reliable rituals, a morning walk, journaling, breathwork, mindful eating, she is sending a powerful signal to her brain. You are safe, you are grounded, you are cared for. This feeling of internal safety is what allows her to navigate external chaos. Imagine a woman in a relationship with an unpredictable partner. One day he's warm, the next he's cold. Her mind, seeking stability, starts to internalize the chaos and question her own worth. But because she has anchored herself in her daily rituals, she does not capsize. She feels the hurt, of course, but she knows how to return to her own shore. She has trained her body to recognize home, not in another person's approval, but in her own presence and breath. This isn't just a nice idea, it's nervous system training. A woman who nourishes herself daily is building a resilient emotional core. Her rituals are a constant reminder, whatever happens out there, I still have myself. And that knowledge is what prevents her from spiraling when life inevitably disappoints. I knew a woman who made a simple practice of lighting a small candle every night before she went to sleep. It was a tiny act, but for her, it was a sacred symbol. It meant that no matter how messy or difficult the day had been, she could still return to a point of light. That little flame was her meditation, her prayer, her commitment to herself. On nights she felt heartbroken, she lit it. On nights she felt joyful, she lit it. On nights she felt numb, she still lit it. That unwavering consistency became a powerful healing force, a quiet declaration that even if the world around her was unstable, she would always show up for herself. And that is the soul of daily rituals. They aren't meant to fix you. They are meant to remind you of your own inherent dignity, strength, and sacredness. In relationships, the effect is profound. A woman who is rooted in her own rituals doesn't chase emotional highs and lows. She doesn't need drama to feel alive. Her inner world is already rich and textured. She brings a calm, steady presence to her relationships, not more chaos. She listens with more patience, speaks with more intention, and responds with more wisdom because she isn't operating from a place of inner famine. She is already full, and that fullness is palpable. It is magnetic. A partner may not even be able to articulate why he feels so safe with her. He just does, because her energy isn't frantic, her attention isn't needy, her presence isn't a demand. She is simply there, whole and grounded. This also gives her the fortitude to walk away from what is not for her. Not with anger, but with reverence for her own well-being. She doesn't need to slam the door. She can close it softly, without needing the other person to understand, because her rituals have taught her that being alone is not a failure. It is a sacred return. She knows how to be with herself without feeling lonely, because in her daily rituals, she has become her own best friend. One of the most radical acts of power for a woman is to treat herself with the same care she wishes to receive from the world, to speak to herself kindly, to nourish herself lovingly, to dress herself with grace, to rest without guilt, to move with respect. When she does this consistently, the universe around her begins to recalibrate to her new standard. The saying, "You teach people how to treat you," is not a platitude. It's a law of energetic reflection. When a woman repeatedly abandons her own needs for others, she models the belief that her needs are secondary. But when she consistently honors her own energy, her space, and her rhythm, others learn this is a woman who must be met with presence or not met at all. In the journey of self-mastery, rituals are more than just habits. They are a spiritual practice, a daily wordless prayer that says, I am worthy, I am whole, I am responsible for the energy I bring into this world. And this responsibility is not a weight, it is the ultimate freedom. Because once a woman truly claims it, she is no longer waiting for someone else to fill her cup. She fills it herself, daily, intentionally, joyfully. In Eastern philosophy, there is the idea that how you do anything is how you do everything. The way you make your tea, the way you fold your laundry, the way you walk down the street. It is all a reflection of your inner state. A woman who moves through her day with frantic, unconscious energy brings that same energy to her relationships. But a woman who pauses to truly savor a breath, who arranges her home with mindful intention, who sits with her food, she brings that same presence to her interactions. Presence is the most precious gift of ritual, and presence is the greatest currency of love. Imagine being in a relationship with someone who is truly there, who doesn't look at their phone when you're speaking, who remembers the details of your stories, who notices the shift in your mood before you have to announce it. That kind of deep attention is the rarest and most beautiful thing. And it begins with how we attend to ourselves, because a woman cannot offer her presence to another if she is chronically absent from her own life. So these small, daily rituals are not trivial. They are the roots that ground her. If she ignores them, her spirit becomes fragile. But if she tends to them, her spirit becomes a wellspring of strength, not only for herself but for everyone she touches. There is no one-size-fits-all ritual. For one woman, it is dancing in her kitchen. For another, it is sitting in silence. Some write letters they will never mail. Others walk barefoot on the earth. Some pray, some stretch, some sing. The what is not the point. The point is that she does it for herself. Not for an audience, not for approval, but to return to her center, to herself, to her truth. And as she does this again and again, her relationships transform. Not because others magically change, but because she becomes a woman who knows her own needs. A woman who gives from a full well, not an empty one. A woman who walks into a room not hoping for approval, but already knowing she is complete. And this wholeness cannot be faked. It has to be lived. And it is lived one small, sacred ritual at a time. When a woman starts to live with this level of intention, when her silence is sacred, her emotions are disciplined, her mind is observant, her life is a creation, her boundaries are clear, and her rituals are consistent, she stops searching for her worth in the world. She embodies it. She no longer has to ask, am I good enough? Because she feels her own sufficiency in the way she greets the day. She no longer wonders, will they choose me? Because she is no longer available to those who require convincing. She becomes a woman whose presence is her message, not because she is louder, but because she is aligned. And in that alignment, her relationships naturally shift, her standards elevate, her circle becomes more intentional. She no longer fears solitude because she is never truly alone. She no longer accepts crumbs because she knows how to prepare a feast for her own soul. Her life becomes her teaching. Her energy becomes her boundary. Her habits become her protection. And anyone who wishes to walk with her must learn to honor her with the same integrity she shows herself every single day. That is the signature of a truly intelligent woman.